立无争，孙立军他骗共产党，骗着一个国家所谓的战无不胜的习太阳，还有称之为比耶稣还牛的王岐山，是多 low 多烂多骗。你觉得共产党能不完蛋吗？你觉得共产党还能在世界上存在吗？他以为找了一个俄罗斯花钱的写手，找了个完全不入流的网站，在这个开庭前，结果写完不到48小时，普恒的 Luc 就在法庭上引用这篇文章。Luc 引用这篇文章和当时在南区法院 PAG 引用多维的假的照片和假的证据，和 Andy Moss 和 Federico 一模一样的路数，完全是无证胡舒立所为。他可以欺骗法官法庭一时，甚至一时对我们没有利。你一定要记住，我这个破产案南区法官的判决和康州的案子，最终美国一定会重审，整个过程就会知道吴征参与了什么， Federico 这个 FBI 的高官参与什么，为什么多维网站关掉，为什么这个写手要这时候写出来被Luc引用，普恒为什么有这么多 conflict， 还要做这个 Trustee 的合作律师，而且Luc瞪眼撒谎酸假释，背后故事一定会被美国司法部还美国接下来中期选举完的国会会重新调查。所以你看吴征、胡舒立、孟维参、熊宪民，整个共产党做这一圈，是对美国司法的践踏，对美国司法的藐视，是对美国最大的威胁。这也是证明我们新中国联邦何其哥是否是真的威震普破，是否是真正的想灭共，是否是真的有决心有能力灭共，是否能让美国人西方人真的觉得我们是好人。如果共产党他有一点脑子猪脑子，他要知道你不说美国人也会查清楚的，他所有做这些事情搬起石头砸自己的脚，愚蠢无知上骗下蒙的结果，而且让我们更加看到了灭共的希望。共产党在美国的疯狂和共产党吴征、胡舒立一用7年直达中央，药师兰、孟维参、胡舒立，这个国家不会有半点战斗力和希望。就共产党这个体制，孙立军这种垃圾，你竟然弄到国家这么高的级别。傅振华那个人烂到不能再烂了，中国的警察都被成为了傅振华、孙立军、孟建柱的玩物，老百姓还能友好吗？一想想习近平一个中国政法委就靠一个吴征、杨澜、胡舒立，一靠7年来对付七哥，他从来没想过所有这些灾难就是来自吴征和杨澜，就来自胡舒立，而且他们对 PAG、PASS 这样的基金和普恒利用共产党的利益，在骗共产党的时候，他拿共产党100块钱，他给这人分1块钱都不错。所以这个体制和这个国家的邪恶是用常语是没法形容。
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to another episode of the CCP Reality Check special series. I'm your host, David Starwatcher, and together joined with me tonight is our co-host, Nancy. Nancy, will you please say hello to our viewers?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm your co-host, Nancy, from New Federal State of China with Washington, D.C. farm. Glad to join David tonight.
Glad to join. And thank you. And I'm very glad that everyone can join in this new episode of the CCP Reality Check special series. So we are going to looking into a certain article that is initially published on ZeroHedge, eventually cited 48 hours later after its initial publication. So without further ado, we will start tonight's live streaming. But for now, I have to read this disclaimer here. And in purposes only, we are dedicated to share with you what is really happening in China and to try our best to verify information used. Jointly, we fight back CCP propaganda. We highly value your independent research, critical thinking, and comments from the CCP Reality Check team. So without further ado, let's move on. So we are still going to looking into the topic of how the CCP infiltrates the US judicial system. And let's move on to see what would this particular episode is going to talk about. So in this episode, we are going to look into the case number 2250073, which is Mr. Miles Gore's bankruptcy case updates And we are also going to looking into the Pepe Escobar's article. If you are interested in more information about the particular bankruptcy case, you can go to pesa.uscourt.gov to looking for the documents related to the case. Now let's move on and let's do a quick recap of Mr. Miles Guo's bankruptcy case. Again, Luc A is a partner of Paul Hastings, who has obvious conflict of interest due to Paul Hastings' connection to CCP. Miles Guo is not only a dissident, he is also the #1 enemy of the CCP. And Paul Hastings has been representing PAG in many cases, and the PAG on the PAX, which is the plaintiff of some of the Mr. Miles Guo's case, and these cases are also a part of the CCP's unrestricted lawfare against Mr. Miles Guo. So let's recap the PAG's connections to Paul Hastings, which shows Luc A has direct conflict of interest as a trustee. So we now see here, Luc A is a partner, as we said, Luc A is a partner of Paul Hastings, and PAG's Wei Jianshan is a top-level spy that reported directly to Qishan Wang. Qishan Wang is CCP's vice president, according to Mr. Miles Guo's intelligence. And Mr. Miles, as we already said, Mr. Miles Guo is not only a dissident, but also the #1 enemy of the CCP. So here, in this particular slide, the title of the article and the article itself from the Law 360 is an example of the PAG's connections to Paul Hastings. In that particular article, the Paul Hastings LLP has helped completed a merger and acquisition of a particular company called Spring IIT. Now, let's move on for a more detailed connections about Paul Hastings' connections to the CCP. This is Jinshan Bank, as we see in the slide. And looking into the red circled area, it says Hong Kong Legal Advisor. That means the Jinshan Bank's Hong Kong Legal Advisor is no other than the Paul Hastings. Moving on to the next slide, we see here for a second. Now we see that one of the key shareholders of the Jinshan Bank is actually Harvest Fund Management. And Harvest Fund Management is found by and controlled by, of course, no one other than Mr. Bruno Zhongwu. So now we move on to the next slide to get a clear look over the comprehensive structure of the relationship between Paul Hastings, Jinshan Bank, and Harvest Fund, which also connected to Bruno Wu. Paul Hastings is the legal advisor of Jinshan Bank in Hong Kong, and Jinshan Bank is held by one of the key shareholders called Harvest Fund, and Harvest connected to Bruno Wu. Bruno Wu controls it. Via Jinshan Bank, Paul Hastings and the Harvest Fund, Paul connected to Bruno Wu. So who is Bruno Wu? Let's just give it a quick recap by moving on to the next slide. This is, so some of the viewers are already familiar with this slide, but for the new viewers, this is a roadmap on CCP's unrestricted lawfare against Mr. Miles Guo. Again, this CCP reality check special series focuses on revealing CCP's unrestricted lawfare against Mr. Miles Guo. It does not mean to attack any specific person. We have looked into the cases in the past of George Higginbotham, Nicky Lam Davis, Joe Low, and Elliot Brody, where all of these people have pleaded guilty. So now let's move on to CCP's ongoing bankruptcy case against Miles Guo and the article that is cited by Luc A 48 hours after its initial publication. So before that, I would like to mention shared Moscow's video where he mentioned the bankruptcy. Trustee Luc A cited an article from a pro-Russian media called ZeroHedge. But let's just look into it. This is an article authored by Pepe Escobar and published by ZeroHedge. The title of the article accuses Moscow as, quote, the fugitive who tried to spark a US-China war, unquote. So what, Nancy, what reminded you when you read this title? I'm very shocked right now. What does that remind you?
Yeah, the narrative of this title must have reminded not only me, but anyone educated by the CCP education system or known this system, right?
Wow.
Only dictator control countries such as China. Right now, one person has this kind of power or influence can embark a war between two countries, right? It's impossible for a democratic country such as US, so individual makes such a huge impact. And also, let's look into the article. Does it support what they are claiming, what we see, right? A few highlights of the article. So the background of the author is a Brazilian journalist, Pepe Escobar, right? The article
Pepe Escobar, yeah,
has a lot of factual errors, false informations, and accusations, and cited even a legal document with forged Escobar's signature on it.
Yep.
The information in the article is far beyond Brazilian foreign journalists can access or can even put it together because of the complexity, unless those are provided by the CCP officials from inside. Right? This article also has pieces of information with obviously Chinese-style language translated directly into English. So we will be looking into the details and also the background of these also, Pete Escobar. Yeah.
Thank you. I would say, just before we move on, I just want to remind our audience is that this is actually a hit piece full of CCP-style language. And for now, let's move on to looking at the background of no one other. Or wait for a second. For this one, Nancy, you have mentioned that there are, as Nancy have already mentioned before, error here. For example, if you're looking into the red circle about the birth date of Mr. Moscow, the article says that Mr. Moscow was born in February 1967. But if you look in Mr. Moscow's Wikipedia page, it shows that Mr. Moscow was born on May the 10th, 1970. 1970, 1970, 3 years apart. That is a very obvious factual error. Now we also see Nancy had also mentioned in her highlights shared with us that there's a document contained a forged signature. So the one we shown here to our dear audiences, if you have been looking into the screen, this is the exact legal document we are talking about. The signature below was forged. And also move on. Nancy has also mentioned that the level of complete inside the article is far beyond the level that is far beyond a level that can be handled by a Brazilian judge. These inside information, which we already see that on the screen right now, unless these information are being provided by the CCP officials. This is very, very detailed. For example, the names, these names inside the red circle, such as Li You and some other, and Ma and Zhou, Ling Ji Hua, Ling, Zhou, Ling, and excuse me for a second because this picture is a little bit blurred. But what I'm trying to say is that this particular paragraph has been very clearly delineating the relationships between the people that are mentioned in the article, and this level of complexity and clarity can only be known by a CCP's official, and not to the level, not something that can be obtained by a Brazilian journalist. And also, next one, as for the level of factual error, Nancy has also mentioned some of the translations are directly translated from Chinese to English, not only just the CCP-style language. This is a very clear example. For example that we are showing to you here, you see the underlined part in the upper part of the picture of the ZeroHedge article. It says Xi coin, but this is a Chinese pinyin. And if you're looking at the lower part image that is from Google, actually that should be translated as Himalaya coin, because the Xi coin here in Chinese, they're trying to translate the word Himalaya B into the English, but they cannot find the right word. But they did not get the right word of it. They make a huge translation mistake. And the Himalaya coin is the English name of the things that they attempt to defame and attack.
Right.
So now we move on to the next one.
This is the example. Right? There were few of these obvious Chinese pinyin translate into English. How could a Brazilian know Chinese pinyin and then translate into English? Yeah.
Good question. I mean, we don't know the answer. I mean, but that's but we're thinking about these questions with our common sense, that with the normal way of thinking, that is really, really, really hard to comprehend. So now we are looking at the background of this particular author called Pepe Escobar. So this Pepe Escobar here is a Brazilian author that is and he is being employed to write articles for RT America in 2012. If you want to know what RT is the Russia Today. We will talk about that later. For now, we will continue to see some of the open records about this Pepe Escobar. So now, we have underlined and circled two parts in this picture. In the underscored part is someone quoted from the United States State Department's Global Engagement Center. The of the United States State Department has identified several outlets that publish or republish work by Pepe Escobar as being used by Russia for propaganda and misinformation. That is a track record. And let's read, looking at this red circled part. Be patient. I know that can be a little bit hard, but on February the 25th, 2022, the Spanish newspaper ABC criticized Escobar's Sputnik comments. Sputnik, again, is another Russian media. These comments concerning Ukraine and other topics. And the newspaper criticized that comment by writing down a topic by calling it as Los habituales de la desinformación rusa, imperialismo yanqui, excesos de la OTAN, victimismo ruso, which translated as the usual ones of Russia disinformation, Yankee imperialism, NATO excess, Russian victimization. Now, we move on to looking at the GEC's identification. That's the we now see this entire PowerPoint slide here, and it says the title as RT and Sputnik's role in Russia's disinformation and propaganda ecosystem, which means the entire Department of State have identified RT and Sputnik as the media outlets funded by the Russian government. Let's move on. Because we want to looking at this particular diagram, and thanks to the GEC that put a very comprehensive and clear diagram of the relationship between Sputnik, RT, and of course, Vladimir Putin. RT, Russia Today, was launched on 10th December 2005, which is 16 years ago, and it actually belongs to TV Novosti, a subsidiary of RIA Novosti. RIA Novosti is a state-owned entity of Russia. Now, you also, everyone, if you wonder, looking at this slide there, you saw the little red circle with RT. We help you figure out that's Russia Today. And as for Sputnik, Sputnik is actually being known 92 years ago, back in 29th of October 1929. It's been known as the Soviet Union's Radio Moscow. And then in 1993, it becomes Voice of Russia. In 2014, which is about 8 years ago, 7 to 8 years ago, it changes its name to Sputnik. Now, we go on and take a look for a closer look how these two entities, RT and Sputnik, connects to Pepe Escobar. Move on. All right, please be patient. Please be patient. We are going to looking into the article which shows about the connection to proxy sites and its RT and Sputnik's relationship with Pepe Escobar. Director, we can now move on to the next slide for our audiences. Okay, seems like there's actually some of the technical difficulties. Okay, okay, just okay. I think I saw the audio. Oh, okay, good. Red circled part. It said, by either generating or laundering disinformation and propaganda narratives, RT and Sputnik have mutually beneficial relationships with writers for proxy sites, including Filian Cunningham, Pepe Escobar, and Christopher Black. Interesting. It's that connection to proxy sites. So it seems like RT and Sputnik does not directly, according to this article, of course, does not directly working with Pepe Escobar, but using a proxy site will cooperate with the writers for the proxy sites, including Pepe Escobar. So that's basically a track record, which means that Pepe Escobar has been working with the Russian government-funded entity for a very long time. So viewers may try to ask, what does Russia has to do with the CCP, and how does this article connect to the case? Let's continue to the next slide, and Nancy, you're about to bring what is going on behind the scenes for all of us. Nancy?
Yeah, when we're talking about the CCP and Russia, as globally everybody knows, both countries currently enjoy the best relationship they've ever had since the late 1950s. Although they have no formal alliance, the two countries do have informal agreement to coordinate diplomatically and economic moves, as we can see all day and out, and build alliance against the United States. So that this connection that also the Brazilian also have a strong connection, as we have shared earlier in earlier slides. Is this a coincidence, right?
That is a very good question. So there are two questions here, and it's actually, I think it's for every one of us, including me. Question will be, why can a Brazilian journalist obtain so much confidential details that can be known only by the CCP's top officials? Not even the Chinese people can get to know them. The second question will be, how come this article that was just initially published on ZeroHedge could be cited by Luc A merely 48 hours later? Is this a coincidence?
Yeah, obviously it's not. And ZeroHedge is known for its economic data, right, and financial information. At least from my knowledge, I don't think it will be frequently reviewed by a law firm partner.
That is very, very honestly, very strange. I mean, so quickly, 48 hours. And not even mention, sometimes some of the review may not have been completed, but we have to leave this question open. So we are again close to the end of this particular episode of the CCP Reality Check special series. Let's continue to the end. So do a quick recap of the background. So recently, CCP has openly shown its collaboration with Russia by having joint military exercises. And PAG, the entity controlled by Wei Jianshan, of whom Wei Jianshan is the spy, of course we have already mentioned, used the same tactic, producing a heat piece and making it be cited by the lawyers who are representing the PAG. Such kind of tactics has been used in the past as one of the efforts of the unrestricted lawfare waged by the CCP against Mr. Mao's score. So now we see the people involved in the CCP's unrestricted lawfare against Mr. Mao's also see the tactics used by the CCP in this unrestricted lawfare against Mr. Mao's score. And of course, we already see Bruno Zhengwu is the mastermind behind the lawfare. And we also shared George Higginbotham, Joe Low's case, Nicky Lam Davis' case, and Elliot Broidy's cases, of whom all of these people have pleaded guilty. So, until further ado, let's stay tuned for the future episodes, so that we can bring you more about the cases on the people who involved in the CCP unrestricted lawfare. But before we end this particular episode, let's looking at the live chat, shall we, Nancy?
Sure.
Okay, so I will first help find out some of the very interesting comments. Sam said Russia today is a voice of Putin. That it has to be the voice of Putin, of course. It's being funded by the Russian government. And Nancy, do you see any interesting comments you want to share?
I think I'd like to highlight also a comment from Sam, right? Depict Mr. Gore as a criminal by the trust fund by chance use this article to support his motion, right, in 48 hours. Is Luc just a lucky guy again, right? Like his unprecedented appointment, although there's obvious conflict of interest. There's too many coincidence and lucky into this whole bankruptcy case. That's obviously to our audience, right?
So I should say that too many coincidences are not coincidences at all. I mean, as we always say, right?
Yeah.
But at this point, we have to, yeah, that's true. And let's see. Oh, and there's always there's another comment from one of our old viewers saying that the CCP regime uses this type of news, which is the article we shared with you, to brainwash the Chinese people into thinking the way the CCP wanted the Chinese people to think. That's a very important point, though.
The narrative,
Nancy,
the way
do you have
manipulate their social media. Yeah.
That's to manipulate the social media, and well, at this point, we have shared a lot about this article today and its connection to the CCP's unrestricted lawfare. Nancy, do you have anything you wanted to share with our audiences before we end today's episode?
Yeah. Again, I wanted to remind the audience that are interested in Mr. Maisgo's case, bankruptcy case, right? For us, we're showing. We're doing the show just trying to reveal the CCP's evilness, and then how do they are making influence, right, in the DOJ's, U.S. DOJ's system, right? But for if you are interested in the case and wanted to find more, all of these case information can be available, accessible on the PACER U.S. courts.government official site, right? Yeah, do your study, your own homework. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nancy. Again, the website is pacer.us courts. Let me just double check. Okay, it's pacer.uscourts.gov. That's the website we've put on our PowerPoint today. And again, the Chinese Communist Party is evil. The Chinese people are the victims of the CCP regime, and the Chinese people are standing up to take down, we the Chinese are taking down the evil CCP. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you everyone for joining us for tonight's episode. I hope you all have a great night.
Thanks everyone for your support and joining us.
We'll see you next time. Yeah. Goodbye.
The Chinese Communist Party has fiercely assaulted the American judicial system while most Americans slept. The 5-year legal battle between PACS and Miles Guo goes far beyond an ordinary debt collection and becomes a battleground for defending American justice free from the CCP's interference. Protecting Americans' judicial independence is the responsibility of the American people. We are the new Chinese who are taking down the CCP, and we're here to help. The plaintiff and creditor, PACS, Pacific Alliance Asia Opportunity Fund, is a subsidiary of PAG, Pacific Alliance Group, headed by Shan Weijian, a CCP-registered spy with a public persona of a successful venture capitalist and a seasoned executive. Representing PAX is the international law firm O'Malveny, one of the first U.S. law firms to set up in Communist China, and was just awarded a top practice in Communist China in June 2022.
The defendant, debtor Miles Guo, the seventh son of a poor rural family with 8 boys. At age 13, he's already made fortunes with his various business adventures. At age 19, he was persecuted by the CCP for providing financial aid to the 1989 June 4th student movement, but survived the 22 months torture at the Qingfeng Detention Center. In 2015, he fled China and started the whistleblower movement in 2017. Mr. Guo's truth-telling broadcastings have awakened hundreds of millions of Chinese from the mind-controlling spells the CCP has cast on its people and the world. Hence, he became the most formidable enemy of the CCP.
Let's start with the scandalous incident that occurred most recently in the U.S. Bankruptcy Court District of Connecticut On June 15, 2022, the court issued a memorandum of decision granting the United States Trustee UST's motion for the appointment of a Chapter 11 trustee. 15 days later, on June 30, 2022, the UST filed a notice appointing Joe D. Whitley as Chapter 11 trustee and an application for seeking the court's approval of the appointment of Whitley as Chapter 11 trustee. On July 5, 2022, the day of the scheduled hearing of Whitley's appointment, UST notified the court that it would withdraw the application for the appointment of Whitley as the Chapter 11 trustee. What was supposed to be an appointment hearing of Whitley becomes a heated 39-minute debate between the judge and the UST on if the UST should have followed the procedure outlined in the bankruptcy code in removing Whitley, who at the time of this hearing had signed an affidavit under penalty of perjury declaring his disinterestedness. Despite the judge's inquiry, the UST attorney Holly Claiborne asserted that the UST has the governmental privilege and does not need to discuss or explain how the UST selects a trustee. Nevertheless, Claiborne emphasized the need for the UST to select and install an individual who can be impartial to all parties in the July 5th hearing. Only 2 days later, on July 7, 2022, the UST filed a notice appointing Luc A. Despins, a partner at Paul Hastings LLP, as Chapter 11 trustee, and an application seeking the court's approval of the appointment. Like O'Malveny, Paul Hastings has a significant and active presence in Communist China. Upon obtaining this news, Mr. Guo posted on Getter on the same day, stating that Paul Hastings is a long-term partner of PEG, the Plantif PEG's parent company in China, and Luc A. Despins is not a disinterested person. This news rattled many followers of the whistleblower movement, who shortly after Miles' post located a shocking amount of evidence online about the close tie Paul Hastings has with PAG and the Chinese Communist Party. The next day, July 8, 2022, Luc A. Despins attended the hearing of his appointment and conveniently told the judge his earlier admission, Paul Hastings' representation of PAG-PEG. The followers of the whistleblower movement were furious at the time, and they turned their emotions into actions. They dug deeply into this matter and exposed more findings on social media. Probably under pressure, on July 12, 2022, Luc A. Despins filed his first supplemental declaration of disinterestedness, in which he declared that Paul Hastings represented certain entities that share a common parent with PAX. He did not disclose any details regarding those representations, other than to state that they were in unrelated matters. Why did the UST approach the two trustees, Whitley and Despins, differently? In Whitley's case, the UST perceived the purported conflict and immediately withdrew Whitley, ignoring the removal process outlined in the bankruptcy code, as well as the fact Whitley and his firm were not directly involved in the conflict. In Despins' case, the late-rising conflict relates to the PAC's parent company, PEG, and the UST moved forward with the appointment at lightning speed, not to mention that the UST willfully ignored the undue influence that the Chinese government maintains over Paul Hastings by controlling its ability to do business in China and Hong Kong. Why did the UST hastily select the second trustee in just 2 days? Why it failed its first decision, made over 15 days from June 15th to 30th. In the next episode, we will share critical information about this case and the CCP's presence and interference in the American judicial system so you can get closer to the bottom of these questions.